All right, this is first grade, Module 3, Lesson 4, and in this lesson we're taking a step towards that standard technique for measuring length, which is the standard technique is, of course, a ruler or a measuring tape. But today in this lesson, what we're going to be doing is the students are going to be using centimeter cubes and lining those up against some sort of objects to measure the approximate length of a variety of objects. The idea is we want students to recognize that they need to line up the endpoints and they need to line up those cubes so that there's no gaps and no overlaps. So let's get started.
So let's say we've got this pencil, and down here we've got a ton of cubes. And the idea is, parents and teachers, is we want students to recognize that if they're going to take a cube and they're going to measure take all these cubes and measure how long this pencil is, the idea is starting our cubes like this is no good because we did not line up our end points. So the idea is you're going to shuffle these around until you get them. And then we're going like this, and all right, so a student might say, oh, look at that. We did it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, this is no good because, yes, we lined up the end points, but we left all these gaps, and that's no good. And so the idea is let's move these so that there's no gaps. All right, so we're going to do this, and that's no good. Why is that no good? Well, that's no good because we've got these overlaps. These cubes are bouncing on top of each other, and that's no good. So the idea is we want to make sure we line up our endpoints and we have no gaps or no overlaps. So I'm going to line up our little cubes. And again, we're talking about length here. And so you can be, as you're lining up the cubes, you could be talking about all the vocabulary. Now here's our answer. We've got lined up endpoints, no gaps, no overlaps, and we can see that the pencil is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 centimeter cubes long. So the idea is we want to use the word about. We don't need to use decimals or fractions. We want to use about. We can also talk about the word approximately. So parents and teachers with your English as a second language students, please talk about these words. These are super important words, mathematically appropriate. Using the word about and approximately are really good, valuable math vocabulary words. So now that we know that we need to line up the endpoints, we need to have no gaps, no overlaps, we're just going to use our cubes and we're going to measure, in this case, we're going to be measuring the height of a lollipop or the length of this lollipop. And now in my case, I just made up these cubes, right? So my answer is not going to match the answer in the answer key. So I can see my cubes lined up and it's equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5. Now I'm kind of bummed because they don't have the word about. So it should be about 5 centimeters long. And again, we're just doing this. Now what's best? What would be best is parents and teachers, just give your kids a bunch of centimeter cubes and tell them to go measure a bunch of things. Go measure the length of your shoe. Go measure the length of a pencil. Go measure the length of crayons, etc. Now, if your dog will stand still, go measure the length of your dog while he's sleeping. So that's the idea of this lesson, is to get these cubes, have them line up, start at the end points, no gaps, no overlaps, and that's how we're going to be measuring objects in real life. And here is a nice graphic version, I guess, or representation of different ways that students might measure a spoon. So, is this a good way to measure the spoon? No, because they didn't line up the endpoints. No good. So, is this a good way to measure the length of the spoon? Well, they sort of lined up the endpoints, but we have gaps, so that's no good. How about this? Well, they lined up the endpoints, but we have some overlaps. So that's no good. And by a process of elimination, well, we've lined up the endpoint. You'll notice we didn't line up this endpoint, but that's okay. We've lined up this endpoint, and there's no gaps, there's no overlaps, and we can see that this spoon is about, right here, about 4 centimeter cubes long. And that wraps up first grade Module 3, Lesson 4, using centimeter cubes to measure the lengths of objects, keeping in mind that we have to have no gaps, no overlaps, and we need to line up our endpoints.